and welcome to 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. We are in lesson 18, which is the fifth lesson on rule number 4. And last week, we were beginning to think about how we can truly begin to know ourselves, because we are going to judge ourselves not against other people, but against our own progress toward goodness. And to be fair, to be a good judge, we have to know ourselves profoundly. And very few people know themselves profoundly. So let us continue reading. We are asking questions of ourselves to try to understand what kind of person we are. So let's continue. How do you need to be spoken to? What do you need to take from people? What are you putting up with or pretending to like from duty or obligation? Consult your resentment. It's a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. It's part of an evil triad: arrogance, deceit, and resentment. Nothing causes more harm than this underworld trinity. But resentment always means one of two things. Either the resentful person is immature, in which case he or she should shut up, quit whining, and get on with it. Or there is tyranny afoot, in which case the person subjugated has a moral obligation to speak up. Why? Because the consequence of remaining silent is worse. Of course, it's easier in the moment to stay silent and avoid conflict, but in the long term, that is deadly. When you have something to say, silence is a lie, and tyranny feeds on lies. When should you push back against oppression despite the danger? When you start nursing secret fantasies of revenge. When your life is being poisoned and your imagination fills with the wish to devour and destroy. So there is a lot of good language in this paragraph. Let us go back. And if I do not answer some question that you have about language, you can always email us. I think there is contact information for our producer, Julio, and he can get any questions to me, and we'll answer them next week. But let's see what I can do with this paragraph. How do you need to be spoken to? This means, do you need to be spoken to gently, or do you have a thick skin? Thick skin is a euphemism for being insensitive and not easily insulted. Many women need to be spoken to gently, or they get hurt and scared away. What do you need to take from people? I think this is speaking in a very broad psychological sense. Do you take your affirmation from people? Do you derive your security from friends? Do you require your friends to help you in some way? For example, when you need a ride somewhere, you call them and they take you. Or when you need help with a task, you call and they help you. What kinds of things do you need to get from the people around you? That's what this means. What are you putting up with or pretending to like from duty or obligation? Putting up with. If somebody irritates you, somebody does things that you don't like, but you do not say anything, you just let them keep doing it, you are putting up with them. So I put up with my children taking my stuff anytime they want. They walk into my house, they take anything they want, and they leave and take it to their house. If I lose something, I only need to look at one of my children's house, and there it is. I put up with that because I love my children, and I don't really mind too much. I put up with one of my children is always in a bad mood, and he is kind of negative. I don't say anything. I just put up with it. So, what are you putting up with? Or pretending to like. Pretending to like some behavior someone does. For example, I knew a man once who had a habit of playing practical jokes on his wife. So maybe when she came into a room, he would be hiding behind the door and he would go, "Boo!" and scare her. She would pretend to like this because he thought it was funny. So, what are you putting up with or pretending to like from duty or obligation? Consult your resentment. Consult means to ask questions of, to seek information from. So if you're going to consult your resentment, you are going to be looking at your resentment in order to find out some information about yourself. What can your resentment teach you? Resentment is a revelatory emotion. That means it reveals something about you. It is a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. There's a bug. I'm going to slap it sometime. This construction, for all, it means that the thing that follows is very negative. So pathology is negative. Resentment is a pathology. It is pathological. It is bad. But the thing that comes before is valuable. So resentment is a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. So it's something good for all some bad characteristic. So I could say Adolf Hitler was efficient for all his evil. I could say the left, the political left, has a good heart for all their faulty thinking. So that's the construction. Resentment is a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. It's part of an evil triad. Notice this. When you are going to give a list, you can use a colon to introduce it. An evil triad: arrogance, deceit, and resentment. Arrogance is aggressive pride, in your face pride, as a bully. That's arrogance. Deceit is lying, falsehood. And then resentment is anger that simmers for a long time. Nothing causes more harm than this underworld trinity. The trinity is arrogance, deceit, and resentment. And it is an underworld triad because people hide these emotions. These emotions are under the surface of our psyche. We do not admit them easily. Admit meaning we won't say we have them. We don't look at them. We just experience them subconsciously, usually. And they do a great deal of harm in our lives. But resentment always means one of two things. Either the resentful person is immature, and we are going to move on. Hold on, wait a second. I'm going to find the or. So it's got to be an either and an or. Here's the or. Either the resentful person is immature, or there is tyranny afoot. Tyranny afoot. We will look at what came between in one moment. So, if someone is resentful, either they are immature or they are the object of tyranny. They are being oppressed. This word afoot simply means happening around in the environment. There's tyranny afoot. There's tyranny happening somewhere. It means in the environment, it's not a very specific word. So, if someone is resentful, either they're being immature or they're being oppressed. If they are being immature, so in which case he or she should shut up, quit whining, and get on with it. Shut up. If someone is resentful because they're immature, then they should just shut up. Don't talk about it anymore. Quit whining. Whining means complaining when there is no reason to complain. And get on with it means do your work. Shoulder your responsibility. Forget about other people and mind your own business. Get on with it. And this would be a positive thing. Not get on with complaining and whining. Get on with fixing your own life. So if they're immature, whoops, I lost my pencil. If they're immature, then they need to shut up, quit whining, and get on with it. Or If they're not immature, then there is tyranny afoot, in which case the person subjugated, the person being oppressed, has a moral obligation to speak up. Speak up, meaning make your voice heard. Blow the whistle would be a euphemism. Do not suffer in silence. Speak up and stand up for yourself. You have a moral obligation to push back against tyranny. That's what it's saying. A moral obligation. Some people think it is more godly or more virtuous to suffer in silence. But Jordan Peterson is saying that you have a moral obligation to speak up. And why? Because the consequence, of remaining silent is worse. So it is worse to be silent in your oppression than to speak up and brave the consequences of that. Of course, it's easier in the moment to stay silent and avoid conflict. But in the long term, that's deadly. What's deadly? Staying silent is deadly in the long term. When you have something to say, silence is a lie. So this is one support for his thesis that speaking up is a better option. And that you have a moral obligation to speak up if you are being oppressed. And you are resentful. Your resentment is the signal that you are being oppressed. So, when you have something to say, silence is a lie. And here we are not talking about trivial chatter. We are talking about a serious point that needs to be made, a substantive point. You have something substantive to say. If you have something substantive to say, then silence is a lie. And tyranny feeds on lies. So tyranny becomes stronger in the environment of lies. By the way, the left, the political left, is extremely tyrannous. And they use lies to manipulate people all the time. But we will have to have another show to talk about politics someday. For now, Jordan Peterson says, tyranny feeds on lies. When should you push back against oppression despite the danger? Let's look at this phrase, push back against. This is becoming a more commonly used phrase. Obviously, literally, it means to push. And generally, push back means bring an argument. Raise an argument against something. When should you push back against oppression despite the danger? Despite means you're doing it in spite of or without regard to danger. And the answer to the question is, when you start nursing secret fantasies of revenge, when your life is being poisoned and your imagination fills with the wish to devour and destroy. These two sentences vividly describe the experience of resentment. When your resentment gets to the point that you are nursing fantasies of revenge, and your life is being poisoned, and your imagination fills with the wish to destroy the oppressor, at that point it is time to push back against the tyranny. Whatever is bothering you, it's time to push back against it. Okay? Let's move on to the next paragraph. I'm going to get a new color. Jordan Peterson says, I had a client decades ago who suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. He had to line up his pajamas just right before he could go to sleep at night. Then he had to fluff his pillow. Then he had to adjust the bed sheets. Over and over and over and over. I said, maybe that part of you, that insanely persistent part, wants something, inarticulate though it may be. Let it have its say. What could it be? He said, control. I said, close your eyes and let it tell you what it wants. Don't let fear stop you. You don't have to act it out just because you're thinking it. He said, it wants me to take my stepfather by the collar, put him up against the door, and shake him like a rat. Maybe it was time to shake someone like a rat, although I suggested something a bit less primal. But God only knows what battles must be fought forthrightly and voluntarily on the road to peace. What do you do to avoid conflict, necessary though it may be? What are you inclined to lie about, assuming the truth might be intolerable? What do you fake? Okay, let's go back. Okay, first, we should recognize that this whole paragraph it's an anecdote, it's a story that he brings in order to support what he said in the previous paragraph. In the previous paragraph, he said that resentment is a revelatory emotion. We should consult our resentment to find out what is bothering us, what our problem is, and that we should begin to push back against oppression in our lives when our resentment builds up to a certain point. This story is of a person who was oppressed, apparently, by his stepfather. Right here, his stepfather. Now, at first, the man didn't know what his problem was. The presenting problem, the problem that he brought to Jordan Peterson, the psychologist, was that he had severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. He had to line up his pajamas just right before he could go to sleep. Then he had to fluff his pillow, adjust the bed sheets, and he had to do this ritual over and over and over and over. Usually in English we say over and over, 2 times. When he says over and over and over and over, this suggests an infinite number of times. This guy is mentally ill. He has to lay out his pajamas and fluff his pillow and adjust the sheets. And then he has to relay out the pajamas and refluff the pillows and readjust the sheets. And oh no, pajamas aren't good anymore. Readjust, readjust, readjust. And Jordan Peterson suggested that maybe this behavior wanted something. Inarticulate though it may be. Inarticulate means it cannot use words to clearly say, I want to punch my stepfather. It can't say that. It can only be like a baby crying, wah, wah, wah. When a baby cries, maybe he's hungry. Maybe he needs a diaper. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe he has a stomachache. Maybe anything. It is an inarticulate and non-specific cry. So sometimes our psyches will throw up inarticulate, non-specific cries. So Jordan said, what does it want? And the man said it wants control. That's a good answer. The man feels out of control. Why would he feel out of control? Jordan needed to dig a little bit further in that point. Control was good, but not enough. Where is the problem? What is the man resentful of? So Jordan said, close your eyes, and let it, meaning the resentment, the obsessive compulsion, let it tell you what it wants. Don't let fear stop you. People are afraid to admit what they really want, so they will not look and they keep it buried. So don't let fear stop you. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to act it out. Maybe the person inside wants to kill the father-in-law, and he is afraid to know this. So Jordan says, you don't have to do it, but don't let fear stop you from recognizing what you want. So, you don't have to act it out just because you're thinking it. Then the man said, it wants me to take my stepfather by the collar, this is collar, put him up against the door, and shake him like a rat. Now Jordan is speaking. Maybe it was time to shake someone like a rat. What he is saying is maybe it was time to push back against the perpetrator of the oppression. Maybe it is time to push back against the tyrant. So maybe it was time to shake someone like a rat, although I suggested something a bit less primal. So Jordan is saying, maybe the man needs to push back, although maybe not so physically. But God only knows what battles must be fought. So this but is changing us from what came right before. So let's look here. Maybe it was time to push back, although maybe not physically, but maybe physically. Okay, so this but is turning to the opposite of what was before. So the sequence is, maybe it is time to fight, although maybe not physically, but maybe physically. That is the progression and sequence that we get from the although and from the but and from the maybe. Jordan Peterson is expressing something he is not completely sure about. So he is not making definitive statements. He is raising possibilities and suggesting that maybe it is legitimate to even fight. when he says, God only knows what battles must be fought, he is saying he does not rule out even shaking someone like a rat. He does not rule out. That is a double negative in English. If we said he rules out shaking, that means he says you cannot shake. He does not rule out means he is saying you can shake someone like a rat. So, he does not rule out even a physical conflict when he says God only knows what battles must be fought forthrightly, voluntarily, on the road to peace. So the goal, the destination is peace. But only God knows what kinds of battles must be fought in order to establish peace. Forthrightly suggests honesty as opposed to physical force. Voluntarily suggests really courage, because you could have kept silent and cooperated forever with the oppression. But no, you choose voluntarily to say that is enough. I am going to push back now. Now we have questions again to help you know yourself. What do you do to avoid conflict, necessary though it may be? What are you inclined to lie about, assuming that the truth might be intolerable? What do you fake? What do you do to avoid conflict, necessary though it may be? I think what he is saying is, perhaps in order to avoid conflict, you do things that you believe are wrong. And so he is reassuring you that those things may be necessary, and that it is okay for you to admit what you do. For example, what do you do to avoid conflict? Perhaps you lie and say everything is okay. Perhaps you smile when you feel like frowning. Perhaps you bring gifts that are really meant to pacify the person. Perhaps you apologize even when you did nothing wrong. What do you do to avoid conflict? Perhaps you go many miles out of your way to avoid seeing someone. Next question. What are you inclined to lie about, assuming the truth might be intolerable? Just spoke about that. Many women lie about the fact that their husbands physically punch them and abuse them, because they are afraid that if they tell the truth, maybe the husband will beat them up worse, or maybe he will go to prison and then they'll have no money to take care of their children. What are you inclined to lie about because you assume the truth might be intolerable? What do you fake? Many people fake or pretend to be happy when they're not happy in a relationship. Okay, let's move to the next paragraph and go to red. The infant is dependent on his parents for almost everything he needs. The child the successful child, can leave his parents, at least temporarily, and make friends. He gives up a little of himself to do that, but gains much in return. The successful adolescent must take that process to its logical conclusion. He has to leave his parents and become like everyone else. He has to integrate with the group so he can transcend his childhood dependency. Once integrated, the successful adult then must learn how to be just the right amount different from everyone else. Let's go back to the beginning. This is the process of individuation. Remember in the beginning, Jordan said that children must be compared to each other, grades in school, etc., because they have not yet become individuals. But as they grow, they become more individuated, and as an adult, you are so unique in your likes and dislikes, in your abilities, strengths, weaknesses, and in your situation, that it is no longer legitimate or fair to compare one adult to another directly. It becomes comparing apples and oranges. But when you are an infant, it is not that way. The infant is dependent on his parents for almost everything he needs. The child, the successful child, can leave his parents, at least temporarily, and make friends. He gives up a little of himself to do that, but gains much in return. I think he gives up a little of himself to make friends, not to leave his parents. The successful adolescent must take that process to its logical conclusion. What is the process? To leave his parents and become like everyone else. So becoming like everyone else is part of making friends and being social. You have to lose something of yourself, but you gain much in return. He has to integrate with the group so he can transcend his childhood dependency. If a person doesn't integrate with society, we are social beings. Most people cannot live alone, even just without friends. Of course, we also need everything else too. Once integrated into society and into a friendship group, the successful adult must learn how to be just the right amount different. Just the right amount different from everyone else. That's tricky. If you are too different, people will reject you. But if you are too similar, people will not respect you. And they will be bored with you and not want to be your friend. So you have to not err on either side and just get that sweet spot in the middle. Moving on. Be cautious when you are comparing yourself to others. Your means you are. You're a singular being once you're an adult. You have your own particular specific problems, financial, intimate, psychological, and otherwise. Those are embedded in the unique, broader context of your existence. Your career or job works for you in a personal manner, or it does not. And it does so in a unique interplay with the other specifics of your life. You must decide how much of your time to spend on this and how much on that. You must decide what to let go and what to pursue. So, be cautious when you're comparing yourself to others. The whole thesis of this section is that it is not fair to compare two adults directly, because they are all singular beings. Singular means there is only one of you. You are unique. And you cannot compare a unique item to anything else directly. And you are a singular being once you're an adult. When you're a child, it's different. You have your own particular specific problems. What kind of problems? Well, you have financial problems, intimate, meaning within your family, your husband and wife, your immediate family. Psychological, what bothers you, what doesn't bother you, and otherwise. Otherwise means and everything else. Those are embedded in the unique, broader context of your existence. Those means your problems. Your unique problems are embedded in the unique, broader context of your existence. So it's not just your problems, it's your situation. Most broadly. And this is unique to you. Your career or job works for you in a personal manner. Works for you means I like it and I am doing well. It works for you in a personal manner, or it does not. It does not means it doesn't work for you. You are not doing well in your job or career. You don't like it and you are not doing well. It's not working for you. And it does so in a unique interplay with the other specifics of your life. So it either works for you or it doesn't, in a unique interplay with the other specifics of your life. That's your job or career. You must decide how much of your time to spend on this and that, this and that. What are you doing? Oh, I'm doing this and that. This and that just means unspecified things. Activities in this case. So you decide how much of your time to spend on this and how much on that. In other words, you decide how much of your time to spend on anything. You must decide what to let go and what to pursue. So the responsibility is yours to make myriad choices. And the way you make those choices is unique to you. Okay, now we have come to the end of a major section. So I would like to look back at the entire section and try to put it all into context. So I'm going to make it smaller again so that we can see it. We're going to go back and find where the section began and remind ourselves of what the main ideas are. Okay. Let us go all the way back to the beginning. I think you can see this. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. This is the overarching thesis of the entire chapter. We started off with a section that told us that inside our heads there is a critic, someone who is judging us harshly all the time. You're too fat. You're ugly. You don't sing well. Everybody hates you. You don't make any money because you're worthless. you're a failure. You may as well die. We have an internal critic who says things like that. And this critic largely bases his criticism on the fact that there is someone else who is better than you by a lot in every area that is true in your life. So you play piano, but you're not Mozart. You run a business, but you're not Bill Gates. You like to play a little football, but you're not one of the main athletes in the world, etc. And by means of this fallacy, it puts you down. Then the Jordan goes on to contradict the internal critic by pointing out that there are many good games. In other words, if you cannot excel in one area, maybe you can excel in another area. And you probably function in many areas. Some very well, some middling, some not so great. That makes you unique. That makes you the only one of your kind. Then he goes on to say, because you are unique and singular, you cannot be compared. It is essential to take everything into consideration before you compare. And since each person is infinitely complex, you cannot compare two people. So the next question was, how can we judge ourselves if not by comparison to another? How can we judge ourselves? And the first task is to know ourselves. So he asked many, many questions designed to help us think about what makes us tick, designed to reveal who we are. And then finally, he said we should consult our resentment to find out where we are being oppressed so that we can find out what it is that bothers us and what it is that we value. And he ends with an exhortation that we should be true to the person we are deep down and to speak up against oppression. And then in the very end, he sums it all up with a restatement of the thesis that we cannot compare ourselves to other persons on a one-to-one basis because each individual is unique. And he reminds us of why that's true. So, next week, we will start the next section about the point of our eyes, or take stock. I'll see you next week.